welcome back. This is part 2 of the GCS week number 2 5NL6 max game. I'm going to go ahead and keep it on going here and start reviewing some hands. Keep on keeping on. Alright, I believe Peter could be raising here under the gun with the ace 10. If he doesn't raise, folding is fine, but king queen offsuit here in the middle position certainly be raising. Perfect. Pyretos coming in for a re-raise, I would imagine. Perfectly fine. I would like to see a re-raise a little larger, up to around 60 cents. 4x out of position, 3.5x in position. And on this board, this is going to be pretty standard bet from Pyretos. Spike should probably call with his overcards and a gut shot. I think Pyretos is going into fancy play mode, going for a check raise, doing something. I think it's a little too fancy, and I feel like you're just going to get maximum value against Spike, who is just a random on the table. He's not a grinding school member, and if he was a grinding school member, then maybe you could be, and if you knew that, then maybe you try and slow play him or whatever. But what you don't want to happen is you don't want to give free cards and eventually end up doing this, but the river check calling is fine. I would rather see bet flop and then bet turn, and you should be able to get stacks in, given the way it's set up. So if you bet 60 cents in the flop, then the pot would be 220, you bet $1.50 here, and then be able to jam it on the river. And a re-raise pot with an overpair, that's really what your goal should be. Alrighty, so Sean's going to be raising it up, and Zane calls. That's perfectly standard from both point of views. I think this is another hand where Sean just kind of barrels and barrels and barrels, and we really need to be more careful, Sean, what we're barreling. This isn't a scare card on the turn. You could barrel any 10, any spade, and any ace, okay? But the 5 of hearts is not one of those. And you just fire 3 streets. And I mean, it's fairly obvious that your opponent isn't folding it on the turn. Once he folds the turn, he's not going to be holding the river either. So I would be giving up at some point much earlier and stop. And you know what I mean? You really slow down on the barreling. Okie doke. In this hand, I think I raise it up here. No, I don't raise it up. I must have been tighter. I would have liked to have raised it up, in my opinion. Zane makes a raise. Pyretos again makes a re-raise. Go ahead and make that a little larger there, Pyretos. And it's kind of strange that now Zane doesn't bet his jack. And I think it's okay to really slow play at this point. If I'm Pyretos, I'd much rather see you continuation bet the flop rather than the turn, because we can be barreling a lot of turns. Like if a king comes in, if a 10 comes in, we have a double gutter. If a diamond comes in, we have the flush draw. There's a lot of good cards that can come in for us on the turn that we can barrel. As compared to once you wait to the turn, we don't represent anything. Now we're just throwing money away. Now, Zane, I'm kind of confused at your line here, and that is slow playing the flop, right, checking it back, calling the turn, and then getting it all in on the river when the flush hits. So you're representing the flush with the jack. You're only going to get called here by a very strong hand, so your raise can't be for value. And I'm hoping the Pyretos didn't call, and yeah, Pyretos called with the SI, which is not a very good call, Pyretos, so you're just kind of throwing money away. And it makes Zane's play look like he's, like it's a sick play. But in reality, Zane, you should just be calling the river. Pyretos definitely be folding to the raise. River raises. Alright, so Junisu makes the re-raise here of Jam Blance in position. I think we could actually get away with 50 cents rather than 60 cents in this instance because we're in position. But, it's better than probably less than 50 cents, so that's fine. I like the check back on the flop. Good river bet. I'm sorry, good turn bet. The question, or the problem I have with this hand is we didn't value bet the river. And for some reason, I feel like you missed some value here. You could have very easily got another $1.60, $1.70 out. She's probably not going to call your river value, but that doesn't mean that you're not missing some money somewhere in this instance. Now, granted, she should have folded pre-flop with her Jack 10 suited, and definitely folded the turn once the ace hits, because there's really nothing that you have in your hand range that checks behind that flop that hasn't hit that turn. at some point. So the Jack 10 becomes a pretty easy fold. But your river value, I mean, you could still get some value from maybe Ace Jack. If she had 2 pair, she's probably going to be betting the turn once you check behind the flop, or if not, betting the river here. So I think you miss some value by not betting the river. Alright, I raise under the gun. We are 5-handed, so that's okay. Peter's going to come in for a call. This is a rather low re-raise size. Out of position, you're probably making it like 75 cents, but Peter makes a decent call, I think, in position with the 10s. No, you didn't call with the 10s. You go ahead and 4-bet jam with the 10s, which is not what you should be doing here. As of course, that's the reason why I'm in the making the video about the hand. You're only going to get called by like Ace King and Jacks are better for 10s. And the thing is, if your opponent was re-raising you light, then you're going to have so much more equity just by calling with the 10s than shoving it all in. Like shoving in the 2s, all right, if you had pocket 2s here, it'd be a little more understandable, just because you want some fold equity, and if you do get called, your equity isn't that bad. But with the 10s, you know what I mean? You're going to be, if you feel like your opponent's doing it light, then just go ahead and call the hand in position and then play it post flop. All right, on this flop, you would have just called her flop bet. On the turn, you would have just called it down as well, like once you hit the flush. So I feel like you got in a coin flipping situation where you really didn't have to, even though you were ahead. Overall, against her entire hand range, you're not. Okay, King 5 suited in the small blind, decent raise. Sean, standard calling. Sean flops the closest thing to the best hand you could get. And, opening straight flush draw 2 overcards is a sick number of outs if we're behind. At this point, I'm not really sure what Pyrotos is doing. Check raising, representing the flush. We're pretty deep. He has no equity in the hand. And that's really the problem I have with it. I don't really have a problem if you guys want to bluff. But pick your spots and pick your equities. You know what I mean? Like, at least have a heart here. Or a 9 or something, because you're going to get called by a really strong hand range. And Sean just jams it in. I don't know if I really like the jam there, Sean, just because I feel like 200 big blinds deep, he might only call you with the ace-high flush in this instance. If anything, I would make it like $3 or so, as long as you can get it in on the river. So that would be like $3.30, and then go from there. Okay, so here comes an interesting hand, for sure. Why didn't I re-raise pre-flop? First off, we are deep. We're about 150 big blinds deep. Last thing I want to do is play in a deep pot out of position and a re-raise pot with like ace-king offsuit. I think keeping a small pot right here is more than okay with me. And if I did re-raise pre-flop, I think I'd be in a world of hurt right now with this flop. It's kind of interesting. I got kind of lucky the way it turned out. This flush coming in, I just go ahead and let out. I actually feel like, Daka, you could have raised me somewhere along the lines here for value. And I feel like you missed some value here, but automatically putting me on the flush. With the set, I feel like you're strong enough that you can make a turn raise, and it would put me in a really tough spot, that's for sure. Like, I didn't expect you to have a set. I actually expected to get value from hand ranges like ace queen and ace jack, and like king x with the x of hearts there. That's the reason why I bet the turn. Like, I didn't think that I was behind at all, but I didn't want you checking it back and taking a free card or not really knowing what hand range I have. If you had raised me to a $1.20 here, I certainly would have to call with 2 pair, and I would probably call with the majority of my hand range, whatever hand that I would be doing this with, or be folding, right, if I was going to be check calling and leading the turn as a bluff. I think, though, I know it's a tough spot for you, and if I had the 5s, I'm a little worried about the flush, but at some point, we have a lot of equity if he does have the flush, and there's not really a whole lot of flushes in my hand range, like maybe 2, right? Because maybe queen jack of hearts, jack 10 of hearts. terms of a combination wise, just because the ace and king of hearts are out there, which makes up a large percentage of those combinations. So I would look into raising this turn here as a bluff rather than, because if a fourth heart comes in, you're gonna be missing a lot of value. All right. This is pretty standard so far. And Pyrotos makes the continuation bet, which is perfectly fine. In fact, both of you guys here should be continuing on this flop. I don't like Sean's flop raise. We have 2 overcards open in a straight draw. There's no need to be like putting more money in the pot here as a big bluff. We can easily just call, represent a much wider hand range, including like pairs and 2 pairs and sets and like the nut straights, draws. We can have anything here by calling, but by raising, we pretty much polarize our hand range down to air, draws, and the nuts. I would call, let the turn come in, and then act accordingly. Pyrotos hits the nuts, which is unfortunately for Sean. But I think the bigger point I'm trying to make here are 200 big blinds deep. Okay, once Pyrotos makes the check raise, and we realize we no longer have the nuts. The nuts in this instance is King Jack, and without King Jack, all right, we should not be stacking off here 200 big blinds deep. All right, which means I think you should fold this river. Now, I know it's really gross, and I know we have the straight, but keep in mind what this river is, right? The river pairs the board, and unless Pyrotos is on a pure outright bluff, with ace king would make the only hand that makes any sense, right? Because if he has ace jack, you're chopping. If he has a set, he's got the boat now, and if he has a pair, he's not going to be playing a pair for 200 big blinds for a pot on this board. So unless he has some really strange air of like ace-7 of clubs that he's playing this way, it's very unlikely that you're going to be ahead here this deep, and I would just be folding the river. And I know it sucks, but like the river pairing gives you an out, because it gives you the chance to fold and not really feeling all that uncomfortable. Like, what if he had a set or something like that? When we are 200 big blinds deep, only stack off with the nuts at that point, especially against somebody else's 200 big blinds deep. Now, I know Pyrotos will stack off lightly, more than 200 big blinds deep, but he's not really sure what you're stacking off with here, and you've got to be comfortable stacking off with this many big blinds, and I wouldn't be. Okay, Sir Mix-a-Lot. First question that I would ask you, okay, Domenico Toretto was a random, so he's not a grinding school member. Against a random, there's really no reason for us not to blind still pre-flop at this point. If we do limp in, it's not to make another aggressive play, like limp calling. It's probably to go ahead and limp fold. If we were going to put in 15 cents in the pot, then we should have just raised pre-flop and not even have thought twice about it. On this flop, it's probably like the worst board ever for 2-pair, because any reasonable stacking off range here is going to have us beat or have a lot of equity against us. Ace-king, king-queen, king-jack, even, I guess, king-10. When he goes ahead and gets it all in, there's not really, a whole lot you can do once you do check raise. I'm not quite sure that we have enough equity, though, to play it this aggressively. It's a very tough spot. Looking back at it again, I looked at these hands last night. Given the fact that he did bet 2 big blinds, I think this is an okay spot, because he's the one who shoved it in. But be very mindful when you've got bottom 2-pair on a draw board like this, and be careful about getting it all in. And more importantly, like, raise pre-flop and then I'd feel more comfortable with you stacking off post-flop if you were the one being the aggressor. Alright, Sir Mix-a-Lot, you could have raised there if you wanted to. Good isolation with the ace-3 suited. I also would like to see you limp behind. I don't think one's Odyssey is a Garnish Club member, so his re-raise with the king-queen suited is not relevant. But what is relevant is our calling the re-raise with ace-3 suited, which is not a very good play. Our opponent re-raised us to 18 big blinds. That's a mammoth re-raise size, especially for just being heads up. There is really not much I would call this re-raise size with. I would probably either be getting it all in or be folding. Like, so I would get in like ace-king, or I'd get in like jacks or better. But everything else, I would just let it go. By calling, all right, we'll make our hand play. This is actually a really good board for us, and it pretty much saves us from having to make any kind of like difficult play, and that we should just be going all in pre. Or I'm sorry, going all in right now on the flop with an overcard, nut flush draw, perfect. Get called off. That's fine. I don't think we hit our hand. And the biggest thing that you could have done was just not call the re-raise pre-flop. All right, I raise up the kings. Get called by the queen 10 offsuit. This queen 10 offsuit is a marginal call, and if you weren't going to call it, I think re-raising it as a bluff would also be an optimal play. I've got the kings, of course. I'm going to be value betting, and then value betting. The biggest problem, in fact, the only thing I really had to say about this hand is your river bet. It doesn't really make too much sense, in my opinion, right? Because I think you're going for a small value, but if you're going to go ahead and call a raise of $1.10 anyway, then you might as well, like is what you did, you might as well just check to me and let me bluff again, like you did on the flop and the turn, rather than like bet and then call the raise. I mean, I know you might think that I'm bluffing, but the really only hands that I have in my bluffing range are diamonds and missed clubs, of which you're not going to get any value from me anyway on the river, because I don't have anything. So, I mean, I guess you could be trying to induce a bluff raise, but at the same time, like, you put yourself in a tough decision when you could have just go ahead and check called the river. Alright, I think the raising the ace-10 suited is fine under the gun. Re-raising the jacks versus the under the gun raiser is marginal. It's okay. I'm not necessarily sure I would do it against another Garnish Club member. But if we do re-raise it here, we're going to have to be willing to get it all in, which is what we did. I've got the biggest question that I have here is with WikiWiki's 4-bet rather, to 43 big blinds. That's a massive 4-bet. We should not really be ever 4-betting unless we are able to do it for 30 big blinds or less, unless we have a really good reason to. So if we're 4-betting here as a bluff, which I really don't know what hand that we have because I never received your hand histories here, WikiWiki, then go ahead and call the re-raise. If you're bluffing, the bluffing costs way too much, and I think I have another hand where you did that too. When I had aces and you like 4-bet 50 big blind and then folded. Usually someone who 4-bets this often isn't going to be folding and shouldn't be folding because of how much money's in the pot. Alright, Sir Mix-a-Lot raises it up. Kind of a random guy, 3-bets very large. I think this is the same guy who 3-bets very large on the other hand too. So that's fine. I feel like against somebody who's kind of even remotely aggressive, I would go ahead and just get it all in right now. And I think the only way really to do that, given the fact he made it 18 big blinds, is to just shove it in. I think that's really the only play we can do, given there's already $1 in the pot. You called, and I mean that's an okay line to take. We flopped essentially the best hand outside of hitting an ace or king that we could, and that is the nut flush. And just like what Wiki did earlier, just going all in is your only option here. You can't call it, as I described in my playing draws post flop series, where with an SPR of 3-1, 4-1 or less or so, which is where we're at 3-1 now. I said about 4.5-1, I believe, or 4-1 in the PowerPoint lecture. At that point, we should be getting it all in on the flop. And so right here, Bink, jam it all in, no questions asked. You can't make a mistake. The way you played it, though, you called the flop and had to fold the turn with your overs and not a flush draw. And that's fine. I would just be jamming it on the flop. And, if he's got pocket aces or kings or queens or whatever, then so be it. But you're going to be fine that you're going to be probably in better shape than you think you are. And you might even be a favorite in the hand if he's got, like, pocket jacks or something like that with 2 overcards and a nut flush draw. Alright, let's see here. Ace king suited. Unless he's calling the ace 6. The reason why I posted this hand was just because Wiki, I want you to barrel this turn. We still have the 2 overcards and the nut flush draw. It's one of the few hands that we can be barreling without any really recourse. If our opponent raises us on this turn, there's a good chance we actually will have implied odds to make the call the raise with a nut flush. I'd rather see you do that than check call the turn. I feel like you're going to have some fold equity. I don't think you don't have any fold equity on this specific hand, so you're not going to be losing any less. But overall, you're going to be getting more fold equity just by being able to barrel more, and you're going to be winning a bigger pot too when you do win your flush. Alright, next play. I'm not a big fan of your call here in the small blind. Sean's call is fine. He could also be re-raising here as a squeeze. Next play, you could also be raising your hand as a bluff. Post-flop, I think is fine. I don't really have a problem with post-flop, so just don't call pre-flop. I would probably call with Queen 10 suited, Queen Jack suited, and I would be re-raising everything else, including like Jack 9, 10 9, all the other suited 9s and stuff. Queen 10 suited is just a little too weak. If you were in the big blind, you could call with Queen 10 suited in the big blind. So it's not that bad of a call, but I think re-raising as a bluff would be better. So mix up, there you go again, limping in the small blind. And you limp call, not great. As played, it's very strange the way this hand went down. I don't know why Pyrotos you check behind the turn. I feel like it's a very easy spot for you to do it for value. So it makes a lot. You had, dream flop. I think check raising the flop would be pretty sick for you, just because he's not going to be folding anything. He's going to think you're bluffing most of the time. So you're going to be very easily to be able to get a big pot there until the river, and don't even give him a chance. You could just like check raise the flop all in. I don't think he folds, only because I know how Pyrotos plays. Pyrotos had a good read on you that you had the 7, which is kind of gross. I would probably fold the river if I'm Pyrotos, because it doesn't make any sense on what he would call the flop with and then overbet the river 1.5 pot. And if he had like 9-8 offsuit, then I'd give him the pot and just be like, whatever, good one. I think a lot of you guys are afraid of getting bluffed, or forced to see a showdown no matter what. And I feel like it's almost a little too prideful, and I would just not feel too worried about it, and just, you know what I mean? If you get bluffed, you get bluffed. You can't stop yourself from getting bluffed. Alright, so far this is pretty standard here. I raise, Colossus calls, Sean calls, all with 3 standard hands. I'm not continuation betting. Colossus has the nuts right now. He's certainly betting. And I'm not quite sure on why Sean calls this river bet. It's quite obvious. I mean, first off, the river bet itself is very thin. And the sizing we made is 2/3 of the pot. It's a good value bet size. And our opponent check raises us for 150 big blinds. At some point, I think maybe the money is affecting you, because I think you normally play like 50 and L. Don't let the money get affected you. Make sure you think of big blinds the entire time, and fold the river here, please. I don't think Colossus would be making 150 big blind check raise all in river bluff, and if he did, then let him have it, please. Okay, so this is a pretty normal play here for Nodeg and I. Nodeg would certainly be able to re-raise me lightly for value with ace-queen, no problem. I think if he made an extra big blind, I would be happy, but whatever, I'm not going to complain. I call pre-flop with my nines, and this is going to be a pretty standard flop for anybody to be continuation betting, so I certainly expect the Nodeg to bet out here. If he didn't bet out this flop, I would certainly be more afraid than if he did bet. The reason why I say that is because he's checking behind hands like queens, jacks, and tens, and betting out all of his air. Yeah, he's betting out ace, king, and aces, but he's not betting out queens and jacks and tens, and those hands that make up a fairly decent amount of his value range that have been crushed. He's going to be bluffing this board every other time that he doesn't have it. I hit the nuts, of course. He checks behind, so now I pretty much know that he has a hand like ace-queen or like air, I guess, right? Because if he had ace-king, he should certainly just be betting and betting and betting, just because like I would have king-queen here, I could have king-jack. I'm obviously going to have nines too, right? There's just so many hands. I could have a flush draw, although I probably would just check jam the flush draw. That if he had ace-king, he's going to keep betting. So I know right now he doesn't really have a king. And this ace binks off. I feel like if I check raise the river, I'm going to not be able to get the entire stack in. So I overbet all in the river, which makes very little to no sense to anybody, like why I did that. Like even right now, I could be like, why did you overbet all in the river? It's pretty much me leveling Nodeg into thinking, like, if he has an ace, he's going to have a hard time folding it, including if he just rivered the ace as a bluff. And if I could have bet $1.50 here, I think he's calling my river bet no matter what. So if I bet $1.50 here, if I go all in, and as long as he calls my all in over like 30% of the time, then me going all in is going to be the same EV as betting $1.50. I'm surprised he looked me up, but I mean, at the same time, I mean, I think he said later, like, you keep leveling me or whatever, or he loved himself. It's hard play for him for sure with the ace-queen facing a river jam like that. I would probably have folded the river, but it is really tough when in a re-raise pot and you've got top pair like that. You could have also, I guess I could have also gone for a check raise on the river with my nines, but I feel like at that point I'm risking checking two streets with my set. If he's got a hand like queens or something like that, I want to make sure I can at least get some value from him. Okay, so I think this eights here is fine. Re-raising the tens, a little loose. I don't really know how two shoots has been playing, so I can't really give you too much info on that. Post flop, I think, is just fine. Betting the flop for value. It's given the fact the way you played it. If you had queens or if you had jacks, queens, or kings, you should be betting the turn again. But checking the turn and then checking the river, I think, is a perfectly normal play given our very marginal tens hand that we have. We got a pretty good board for tens. That's really the reason why I don't like to re-raise them, though, because they're very often we're not going to get a very good board for them. All right, here we're coming down with some more hands. Some extent, you should be raising up the queen jack. And okay, so Pyroto's re-raised me with the tens, and it's fun. I think he's got value with tens to re-raise me because I'm going to be calling him with all kinds of crap. Couple problems though. One, he can't re-raise me this small, and give me set odds to call. If he does, then he can't pay me off when I hit a set like this, like over jamming all in, 200 big blinds deep. I mean, come on, what the hell do I have here? I got a set, or an overpair to the 10th. And I later asked Pyrotos, he's like, well, I'm never folding an overpair to you, like, whatever. And I'm like, well, then you should be re-raising a lot larger pre-flop, so I don't call you for set odds, and then stack you post-flop, because otherwise it's a very minus EV play for you if I'm only stacking off here with fives and getting it in that way. So be mindful, guys, of your re-raise sizes. Oh, by the way, he pays me off. It's kind of gross, but I'm not unhappy. Thank you, Pyrotos. All right, so turn mix a lot. Raises it up. Next play calls. That's perfectly fine. I'm not quite sure why you bet this small. Why not just bet normal size, 20 cents? I'm not sure why 2 big blinds to like induce a raise. The thing is, at 125 big blinds deep, the more money that goes in this pot, like look at all these different raise sizes. Like, you know, I mean, ace jack suited loses equity every time there's an aggressive maneuver. So when your opponent raises us, ace jack suited drops down in equity a little bit. All right, when we 3-bet him back and he min re-raises back again, it keeps going down and down. Like the amount of equity we have went from perhaps 65% here to maybe 50% to maybe 33%. Okay, like every time there's an aggressive maneuver in a play, and then once we get it all in, yeah, we're at around 30%, 25% now because our pair isn't any good. So like stacking off with the top pair nut flush draw is, you know, we definitely have a lot of equity in the hand, but certainly not the nuts as can be seen here against the pocket twos. If you had bet 20 cents, here's how the hand should have gone down on the flop. Okay, you bet 20 cents in this flop. He check raises you to 70 cents. You call the check raise. The turn brings a jack. He bets $1.50. Okay, at that point, you can just call, or you can get it all in once you get the trips. It doesn't really matter to me, in my opinion, because you've got a lot of equity now against the twos that you didn't have on the flop. Because right now, any 3, any ace, any jack, any heart improves your hand. And actually, no, the heart doesn't improve your hand anymore. Never mind. So scratch that. But you probably have more likely chance of being ahead right now. I would probably still call, though, just because it's not really a big deal if you do call and let that free card come out because you're hoping to draw to the flush. So I would call both streets. Let him keep bluffing me. Maybe he has a worse flush draw than me that if I shove it in on, he's not going to be getting it in. All right. On Nick's play side, I think it's a little fancy as you played. Sorry. The raise size on the flop is a little too fancy for me. You should have made this probably like 40 cents. He comes like over the top of you. Go all in here rather than min re-raising him back. You're giving your hand away too much by putting in so many bets. Because you're never really doing that as a bluff. Alright, so on the king's hand, raise. Sir Mix-a-Lot should probably be re-raising. Fine. My biggest problem I have with this hand is your 4-bet size. You 4-bet to 20 big blinds when we should probably be making this around $1.25 to make it make any more sense, because you're probably not doing this as a bluff with this small size. So definitely be more balanced here with this 4-bet size. And if I'm Sir Mix-a-Lot, just go ahead and jam it in now rather than calling the 4-bet. You're making yourself play a very difficult hand out of in position rather, but in a 4-bet pot with the small SPR. There's going to be a lot of bad flops for us, some that we do hit, some that we don't. Go ahead and call. Sorry, go ahead and get it all in rather than calling and hoping for, undercut board. And we eventually had a 2-outer, but we should have gotten it all in pre. No deck played it fine, bet sizing post. Now it'd be interesting to turn it Mix-a-Lot if you actually fold the turn if you don't hit the jack, because I don't think that would be correct for you to do so after putting in so much money. Okay. let's see what happens here. Oh yeah, no dag. You call the 4-bet, and I'm pretty sure you have to figure out what hand you have it with. I don't think I was able to see your hands. I don't think I got your hands. I'm not sure. But here's why I don't like calling 4-bets. Because one, I was 4-bet bluffing. And the reason why, alright, I picked a good 4-bet size, according to your re-raise size, right? So, post-flop, why did I bet 70 cents on this flop? I bet 70 cents on this flop because I really don't feel like I could have made him fold no matter how much I really bet. Like if I bet $1.75, I don't really know if he folds that more often than he say he does 70 cents. The biggest reason why I bet this amount is so that I can shove the turn and have it be a decent sized pot. I'm shoving any turn here with my nut flush draw. If I didn't hit the nut flush draw, I would be check folding the flop. In all reality, so I'm actually very surprised. I want to see what no dag had that he played this way. Maybe jacks, maybe I don't know. Maybe queens. I'm pretty sure he would get queens all in pre. So jacks makes sense. Everything else doesn't really make any sense to me. What he would have in a 4-bet pot. But that's really what you guys can do. If you guys got caught 4-bet bluffing, right, and you get called, and you end up flopping like a draw like this, bet really tiny on one street, right? Nobody says that I like to say that you have to bet 2/3 of the pot, but if you bet 2/3 of the pot here, it's pretty much going to be half my stack. I'm going to be left with a really crappy bet sizing on the next street with no full equity. So this way it looks like I'm still betting the same number of streets, but the next bet, when the bet goes all in, looks a lot larger than it would have normally, even though it's the same amount of money. I do want to see what no dag has there. I'm interested to see. Okay, this isn't a. There's a reason why I re-raised the crap out of him pre-flop. Okay, that I re-raised him to 80 cents, right? 5x the re-raise size, because like we're 200 big blinds deep, or close to that, and I got Pyretos behind me. I got everybody else here is really deep. How many hands am I really re-raising under the gun razor with that I don't have pocket aces on? Okay, if I did have pocket aces, let's say I had ace king, I probably wouldn't be re-raising this large, if re-raising at all. I don't want to make people think that I have pocket aces and then give them odds to draw at the same time when I do have pocket aces. So I re-raise them a hell of a lot pre-flop, reduces pot odds for calling, and if he has a hand like kings or queens or ace king, he's going to continue anyway, right? I mean, you're not folding those hands to my re-raise. Same thing with the jacks, probably. And so I feel like this way it makes your continuing range very similar, and doesn't really give you odds to draw with a big stack like that. And I feel more comfortable building a big pot pre-flop now than say like the flop comes in, and then I'm gonna be a little bit wary of what you're gonna be doing it with. You 4-bet me to 50 big blinds, pretty close to that. I mean, at this point, you put in a third of your stack, you're committed to the hand. There's not really a whole lot you can be doing here. I didn't receive your hand histories either, so I don't know what you have here. But whatever it is, it's not very good, the maneuver to make, because when I shoved it all in, you folded. So 4-betting as a bluff for 50 big blinds is not going to be a good play. And I don't know why you would think I was bluffing you, I'm just making it a crazy raise size. If you did have a hand like queens or ace king, it's not a very good play either, just because I only really have two options here, and that's getting it all in or folding. And if your option is to 4-bet me and then fold to an all in, then you're not really doing yourself any favors. I probably would call if you had jacks or better, and hopefully, you do something comes on the flop to your advantage. All right, Docketberry should be folding here pre-flop for sure with 10-9 offsuit. My standard raise is king queen. That's pretty standard. I didn't see you at this flop. I really didn't feel like Shamble or Docketberry you're going to be folding at all. My turn and river play is pretty standard. A lot of you guys wouldn't raise this river for value. You know, I mean, with the flush coming out there and he leads out. Given that we're deep, okay, I'm actually going to be folding the river if he comes all in over the top. But this is one of those rivers where he never 4-bets me all in without the absolute nut flush. So even if he has, let's say, like king 8 of clubs or something like that, he is not going to be like getting it all in, or even queen 8 of clubs without the absolute nut flush. So I could very easily raise him for value, fold to a 4-bet because he's not going to be re-4-betting me with an 8. Whereas I'll get value from the worst straights, the 8. I'll get value from 2 pairs and sets because they're not folding. 10-9 here should have folded, but you probably should have folded this river. I'm giving my river raise the hand range that I have. You know, it's fairly innocuous. I don't know if I would raise a set of 9s or set of in the situation though. It would be kind of unlikely. But yeah, I think leading out the river isn't that great of a play either, given the 4 straight. I would probably check to induce a bluff. I don't think we can fold though with 2 pair, but we should probably be checking and letting me bluff. Okay, calling the ace-9 here in position isn't actually that bad of a play. You can also re-raise it as a bluff if you want. Here is one of the problems I have with the hand. Okay, you're raising top pair, no kicker. Definitely an overvaluation of the play right here. What do I call this raise with that you beat? Other than the hand that I have, right? 7-5, drawing to hit my straight. I don't really call with anything. I call with ace-8, I call with ace-6, I'll call with ace-10 or better. So your little raise here for quote-unquote information doesn't really give you any information, and you're just losing value. And if the 9 of diamonds hadn't had brought in the flush, I might have overbet jammed again, but I feel like, well, I mean, once the river comes out and gives him 2 pair, he's definitely going to be not folding. So I mean, that's fine. But raising the flop though is not that great of a play. I feel like you can just easily check call it down and let me just keep bluffing and bluff, which I would do. I mean, I bet the turn any turn with the 8 out draw. That you definitely get a lot of value from. Although honestly, with the way this hand turned out, you probably would have lost a lot more money on that river, because I would have bet pretty big on the turn and be able to jam it on the river if I could have. And kind of the same way with these 8s right here than the last hand with the ace-9, right? We don't really need to re-raise the 8s for value. I would re-raise Pyrotos with a hand like pocket 8s, just because I know he's going to be like 4-betting me like crazy. Now, granted, I have been 4-betting no deg, so I mean, arguably that's the case. But I don't. I mean, 4-betting or 3-betting me rather to induce a light 4-bet does have its risks, of which include me like 4-betting you a wider for value range. I feel like you could have just saved yourself a lot of trouble by just calling pre and taking the more standard route than re-raising here. I don't think I would re-raise Pyrotos with 8s unless we were blind versus blind, and I knew he was going to shove me light like in an MTT. 100 big blinds deep though, I don't think I would do it. A loose call here with ace-10 suited. And jack-9 suited here could have come in for a squeeze if he had wanted to. This is actually a decent spot for you to bluff raise with ace-10 suited. Alright, we've got the backdoor flush draw, we've got an overcard, got a backdoor gut shot draw. I think that's okay. Ace-king, I probably should fold it right now. I don't know why your ace-king is calling with nothing. Noda picks up the gutter ball. It's kind of crazy that like ace-king just calls you down here. Definitely not a very good check call. The only problem I have though with flop raising is that you're representing absolutely nothing. You're representing the sets, you're representing the nuts, and that way it's a very polarized hand range. Against granted, I didn't really. I expected Ace King to fold, and Ace King should fold on that flop to a raise. But you have to be able to see, right, like why raising that flop isn't necessarily that great against another thinking opponent, just because we represent 0. And, you know, we can't expect to be called down by ace, but if you actually can represent something, then we're going to be getting folds from more than just ace high. We'll be getting folds from queens as well, or queen X's as well, which is really what we want. Okay, so on the river, Sean, you min raise. I don't know why you min raise. Or I'm turning rather you min raise. I think raising it up to a normal size would be just fine. And section X, you should be folding to this raise with this middle pair. And Sean, you should not be value betting this river anymore because our kicker no longer plays. In fact, there's not really a worse second pair hand they can call us that we beat. Okay, if he has any 10, we lose to that now, as long as his kicker is above a 5. So I would just check behind. All right, one last hand. Pyrotos making a loose re-raise with the Queen Jack suited. Again, this is the hand range that I would have that I would call a raise with rather than re-raising it as a bluff. And if I did re-raise it as a bluff, I'd be re-raising it larger. Versus a 4-bet, which is a very large 4-bet Akabear, right? No, I think actually no, never mind. Your 4-bet size is good. For some reason, I can't multiply. 4-bet size is fine. Go ahead and fold the Queen Jack suited to 4 bets out of position. And that way, like, because how many 4 bets are we going to be able to call out of position and then be able to, continue with on the flop? Okay, so that's the reason why we should just be folding pre-flop, and that's actually the reason why we should just be calling pre-flop and not 3-betting, because so we can actually see the flop and then check fold rather than 3-betting, calling the 4-bet, and then check folding after a big amount of money went to the pot. All right, guys, I am pretty much worn out from reviewing 55 hands here straight through. Pretty tiresome for sure. Hopefully you guys learned quite a bit from this video and yesterday's video. And otherwise, guys, good luck at the tables. See you guys next time, and see ya.